Welcome to Football Unspoken, the home of unique football takes. How's Joshua? How you doing, boyo? We're going to do our predictions for the season, except we're going to put a bit of a Football Unspoken twist on it. And what we've done, as you know, is we've taken 10 of the top YouTubers and seen their predictions, grabbed their average, find out where these teams are predicted to finish on average. So I think I'll start us off with the 20th place. So the team who's been predicted on average from these 10 YouTubers to finish in 20th is Ipswich. And I kind of disagree with it, really. I think Ipswich they weren't lucky to get promoted, but no one thought they would get promoted. I think it'll be a Luton situation again, where everyone enjoys them. We like the fact that they're back up, but I can't see them finishing much higher than 20th.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you from the perspective of saying it's similar to Luton, because last year we spoke about how Burnley and Sheffield came up and they thought they would come and show people how to play football in the Premier League. And Luton actually were a bit more humble, and they were the ones who nearly actually survived relegation. Feels like Ipswich will have quite a similar mentality in that, like they know they're up against it. So they're the ones who are really going to be fighting for their lives sort of day one, as opposed to get to match week 20 and then realize they're in trouble.
Yeah, that's fair. Now for the surprise take, which I think is a true shocker. But from James Alcott, and he's got Brentford in 20th.
Yeah, that's clearly a shocker. Brentford aren't going near relegation in my point. I think they'll be, 13th to 10th, I would say pretty comfortably in there. It looks like Tony is also going to stay and just run down his contract. So that's a big boost to them.
Yeah, you've got them higher than I have. I probably have them potentially being in that 16th position. I don't think they'll get relegated, but I don't think they'll get higher than 13th. Moving on to 19th, the average comes out at Leicester Football Club. I kind of agree with this. I don't know. I haven't seen, to be honest, I haven't kept up with Leicester's transfers. I haven't heard anything major. And I think the gulf between Championship and Premier League is just getting bigger and bigger year on year.
Yeah, it becomes difficult because it's who else would you put in 19th if you're not putting Leicester in there? There's Southampton as well, but between, say, 19th and 18th, I think that's fair enough. The main reason is they obviously lost Dewsbury Hall recently to Chelsea, and that was probably their best midfielder in the Championship last year. They lost their manager to Chelsea as well, ironically. And from a stability standpoint, I think that's a loss. I'm not convinced that he was a loss in terms as a manager necessarily, but just on a stability thing, to have a new manager coming in, you're losing some of your top players. You don't know what you're going to get, and that's not a great position to be in when you're already a relegation fighting team.
Yeah, I do tend to agree. I think the surprise take here isn't really a surprise. It's from Thogden. He's got Ipswich in 19th. I think, Ipswich could get 19th, to be honest. Moving on to 18th, the final relegation spot. We've got Southampton. I actually don't agree with this one, to be honest, personally. I think Southampton, they'll scrape by. I think they will get out of the relegation zone. I don't think there's many years where all three teams that have come up have gone down. And I think Southampton have, as you said, it's not like Leicester. They have the stability in their team, in their squad, in their manager.
Yeah, Southampton have quite a decent squad and a well-rounded squad. The one thing I also would be interested to see is if they have any younger players coming through their academy again this season, because they were known for such a long period. You think Gareth Bale, Theo Walcott, there's a couple more players who've all come through their youth academy who are playing now in the Premier League. So I'd be interested to see if they have a few more of those coming up this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think the surprise take is definitely a rogue one from Alex Griffin going with Everton at 18th. I think we've missed the opportunity to relegate Everton, unfortunately. I think Sean Dyche he's not a relegation manager, realistically. He always manages to scrape through. And they played really well. They played really well the last year, and I can't see that changing.
Yeah, I agree with you that you've lost the opportunity to relegate Everton. But there was a few comments on that video saying, like, just get Everton down now, because they've basically survived by one position in the league. for the last 5 years, it feels like. Lampard and even Benitez didn't have a good time there, etc. So I think a lot of people share the sentiment of just relegate these guys now. They're just wasting.
Get him gone now. Just get him gone. Everton fans really will not like our channel by the end of this. Like, we always seem to be taking shots at Everton. We're moving on to 17th. We've got Nottingham Forest. I kind of agree with this one. I always think this 13th to 17th is always just a bit of a gamble. It's very up in the air, in my opinion. Because one or two good games, one or two good runs, bad runs, and it just switches everything. But I also think once these teams kind of get assured from safety, there's kind of less incentive you tend to see. So I would probably put Forest in that area as well.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think 17th is about right for Forest, but who knows? They do have good players in their squad, Gibbs White and players like that, who I'm surprised no one's come in and tried to buy. And yet somehow Notts Forest have continued to spend money. I think literally this week they signed another player for 35 million. The name is got off the top of my head now. But they're still signing players even after their points deduction last seasons, and they haven't really sold anyone notable as of time of recording. So I don't know how they're doing that. Maybe they can get another points deduction.
Yeah, I think if Morgan Gibbs White leaves or something like that happens, it might change my opinion on it. But currently, I'd probably stick them there. The surprise take again is a real shocker. James Alcott again. He's gone with Crystal Palace, and I just don't see them finishing that low, especially if they keep hold of a couple of their players. They've got to fight on their hands to keep hold of Gahey, but you're gonna get 60 million from Gahey, and you've still got 2 weeks to get another player in with an extra 60 million. I think their manager is very good as well, so I can't see it happening.
Yeah, with Palace's current squad, a lot of people were saying they actually thought they were going to finish in the top half because on paper they've got a very strong squad.
Yeah, 100%. Right, moving on to 16th, we've got Brentford. I'm pretty comfortable with Brentford in 16th. I said it earlier. I think that's kind of the position I see them in.
I thought they had quite a stable squad, and that often goes under the radar. I'm not saying that's normally not the difference to win a league, right? But in terms of maybe move up the table, just keeping the core players together, they know each other better, they know the tactics better, same manager, same style. So I think they'll be a little higher than that, 13th to 10th.
Yeah, fair. I think the wild take, I actually respect the wild take on this one because it's Ipswich by Alex Griffin as Ipswich down in 16th, and I respect that. Honestly, let's give the relegation boys a chance because you never know. Every so often one of them comes out of the woodwork. So I don't see it happening, but fair play. That's a good shout, and I hope it does come true. I hope he proves me wrong.
Yeah, two things. One, I'm noticing a pattern that Rob's making mortal enemies as James, the big mate of Alex, based on their takes so far.
Alex, get me a new channel, Alex.
Yeah, exactly. Get Rob on, he'll come and chat to you. But the second thing worth mentioning is that Alex is an Ipswich fan. So there's a bit of loyalty there from his side, putting them sort of in 16th position.
Nah, there's never any bias towards your own team. I know that personally.
It doesn't count. Anyway, moving on to 15th place in the league. The average had Everton at 15th in the Premier League, which I can see it both ways, to be honest. I can see where people are saying, they haven't been good for years. But if you look at last season where they finished near the relegation zone, but they had a big points deduction. If you take the points deduction away, they would have been probably around, 14th, 13th, I reckon, with the points added back on. So they would have been pretty comfortable, actually, in the end. They have lost Onana, which is a huge loss. But Sean Dyche just knows how to get points on the board in the Premier League.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I can't see them going. I can't see them going much lower, but in the same vein, I can't see them going much higher. Like they're not going to really. I don't see them challenging the top 10. I just think they're going to be a comfortable season again.
Yeah, and then probably I would say the howler take of the episode is from the Irish guy, and he's put Chelsea in 15th. Now, his reasoning was they've kind of they've got a new manager after Potter's left. They've got a bunch of new players coming in, and it's just going to be the same as when Lampard was there. It was just too many players, can't figure out who the starting 11 is, don't know what kind of tactics they're going to play, not because the manager doesn't know how he wants to play, but just because of having too many players. What's the goalkeeper count at the moment? Is it 7 goalkeepers in the squad?
I think it's at least 6. It's definitely at least 6.
It's something very stupid like that. So because of that, they put Chelsea in 15th, which is probably an exaggeration of the situation, but I understand the thought process.
Yeah, well, I mean, didn't they just buy who's it from Wolves? Pedro
Neto.
I think it was Pedro Neto. I think they bought him for 60 million now. So they've got 7 goalkeepers and 8 million wingers at this point. I just don't think they're interested in any other position. But I get where he's coming from, and I would love it if Chelsea finished down there. It would be very funny because I think I don't like the way they're approaching football, to be honest. It annoys me as a football purist. It really just grinds something that I don't appreciate. Trying to bring this Americanized kind of style of ownership to the Premier League, and it just annoys me. It shouldn't, but it does. I mean, I could see them having a shocker of a season. I can't see them finishing 15th, but I could definitely see them finishing outside the top 10 if the manager can't get the players on side.
Yeah. So going on to 14th, the prediction has got Wolves in 14th, which is more interesting now that they have just lost Pedro Neto, who was one of their more influential players. He's grown at Wolves because I remember a couple seasons ago, I didn't think too much of him. He was, funny enough, as an Arsenal fan, he was one of those players who would rock up and play really well against Arsenal and then just not do much the rest of the season. And since then, he's grown into a really strong player. I actually remember at the end of last season, him being linked with Liverpool as opposed to Chelsea. So 14th place, I actually agree with that.
I have a sneaky suspicion that they might be the final relegation team, to be honest. I think Southampton might survive and Wolves might go down because I like Gary O'Neill, but I think he does struggle to get some players on side. You've seen it in a couple of teams that he's managed. He's great with the fans, and when the players are playing for him, it's fantastic. But I think he does have a tendency to lose one or two big players. And I think that would be my concern. And yeah, without Neto, I think the threat of Wolves has gone a little bit.
So the surprise take for 14th place was from the club, and they predicted Brighton to come in 14th, which is astonishingly low. I'm going to go out there and say I actually don't think they're necessarily wrong, because I think Brighton, now they've lost De Zerbi, they can't just keep spitting out these players like Ferguson or whatever that they keep finding, like these great young players, Caicedo even or whatever. We, obviously, months ago now, we spoke about there's a bit of luck with football, and often clubs in general, not just Brighton, but clubs in general go through these periods where they have a bit more luck on their side for the transfers and it's all working out. I just think at some point those transfers working out as well as they have will kind of end with Brighton, and they've got the new manager, so it's unclear how they're going to play with that.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with you. I'd actually forgotten that De Zerbi had gone, to be honest. I'm not going to lie, that was poor from me, but I had forgotten that. So I was thinking initially, like, probably a bit harsh, but now looking at it, I mean, I'm going to be a bit mean about Americans now, but American managers, they've not done well in the Premier League more often than not. They don't do well in Europe, to be honest. I don't know why. I wouldn't want to give you a reason, but I think American managers generally struggle. He's also not got a lot of experience, to be honest. He's only had one full-time, like, actual manager gig for one season with St. Pauli. Like, and now you've gone to Brighton and a team that were pushing for Europe.
Going on to 13th, interesting one, Fulham in 13th. This is an interesting... Yeah, Fulham as a club are an interesting debate right now. They've lost a few good players. They lost their centre-back to Chelsea, so that's a big loss. And the year before, they lost Mitrovic. They seem fine without Mitrovic, funny enough. But my point is, you can't just keep losing players season on season and expect to get even as good results, let alone better results.
Fulham for me is that kind of team at the moment. They're happy to be in mid-table and be in the Premier League. You know, similar vibes. Crystal Palace. They're happy to be that kind of team, and then when they get their players, they'll sell them. I will say I'm very interested to see Emile Smith-Rowe. I think if he plays well, that could be huge for a top 10 charge for Fulham.
So your friend James Alcott's back, and he's predicted that West Ham will finish in 13th. I know he's your mate, but I think that is quite a terrible take, because for me, I may be jumping the gun a little bit here by saying this, but for me, West Ham could easily push a top 8 position.
Yeah, I agree. I think the one thing I would be interested to see is Lopetegui. See how he takes it forward this season. Because obviously David Moyes, the one thing you have with big, loud, passionate fan bases like West Ham, similar to Newcastle, similar to Arsenal, these when you have these big, loud, passionate fans, they turn quite quickly, or they have the ability to turn quite quickly. So I think if he starts well, I think 100% they could even push top 6 realistically. Like you said, they've done very, very good business.
So looking forward to 12, got Bournemouth in 12th, which this surprised me. I wouldn't have put Bournemouth this high. I actually would have put Bournemouth more around that 13 to 16. I'm not saying they're going to get relegated necessarily, but maybe I still have a gripe with Bournemouth after sacking Gary O'Neill now nearly 2 seasons ago. I just hated the way that they let that happen, and I don't think they've got the strongest squad. They just lost Solanke to Spurs. That just happened today. So they can reinvest that money, sure, but you know how it works. When we talk about strikers, where do you find a goal scorer? Even if you've got 65, now you've got to pay him the salary of a 65 million striker, and Bournemouth can't afford to do that. So they're going to have to go and buy maybe 3 players for 20 million and try distribute the goals across the squad. And it's just a much harder thing to do. So for me, 12th is quite high for Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think before losing Solanke, I probably would have put them in that like pushing top 10, but not really getting close to it. Losing Solanke, I think the big thing you lose, and we've spoken about it before, is the goals. And at the end of the day, trying to replace the goals, because it's all well and good being like, I got 65 million, but for example, you use 55 million to buy the player and the rest on the wages. You still have to convince him to come to Bournemouth.
Yeah, so the surprise take for 12, your friend James is back. And I personally think this is a good shout. It's quite a fair valuation of the league. So James Alcott has put Newcastle in 12th position, which I think, like I said, total fair observation of the squad.
I mean, that's just what he's done there. Honestly, the more I look at this list, the more I see James Alcott's name, the more I'm like, this bloke is just a rage bait of note. You've just taken a shoot. I don't understand the reason. You see, like there are other shouts that people have made, and I'm like, I could see the kind of reasoning for it. But I look at the shout for Newcastle. I'm like, what? We haven't lost anyone major. We're getting Sandro Tonali back. We haven't done fantastic business, I will say that. So injuries could become a factor again. But we're playing less games, and I just don't understand why he's put us in 12th, to be honest. Like, yeah, I'll speak more about Newcastle when we get to the average position, but I think that's just pure and utter I want comments and I want views and I want clicks in my book.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that was more of a rage bait or clickbait position. His reasoning at the time was a lot of, pretty much actually everyone, we will talk about Newcastle, let's talk about Newcastle when we get there. But there was one consecutive trend across everyone. They had one concern about Newcastle, which I'll get to. So looking into 11th position, Brighton, average. So we spoke about Brighton a little bit already, so I think I know your thoughts on that. I tend to agree with a new manager coming in. It's not clear sort of how they're going to play, how they're going to be without De Zerbi. I will say they've signed that young player from Newcastle who did so well in Feyenoord.
Yeah, I do agree. I think, what's his name? Minty from Newcastle. I'll be interested to see if he gets the playing time. I'll be annoyed if he does, because that just means we've had to sell him because of PSR. I think 11th is probably around about where I'd put them.
And then with regards to the surprise take, Alex Griffin, I mean, I know you agree with Alex Griffin a lot of the time. Alex Griffin has put Brentford in 11th, which seems a bit high to me.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, we spoke about Brentford a fair bit, and I think we both kind of agreed that I think they're going to struggle with getting the best out of Cody. I think they're just not in a very strong position, or at least there's not as strong a position as there were a couple of seasons ago. I'd be interested to see Mbeumo. To be fair, if Mbeumo can have a good season, that might rocket them up a bit. But then moving on, so we'll go on to 10th position. 10th position, we got the average is West Ham. And again, we spoke a fair bit about West Ham, and I think we're both pretty content with how. I think this is a pretty fair evaluation of West Ham at the moment. Being 10th, looking at that top half, I think they could push top 8, and if they have a good season, they'll definitely push top 6. But
yeah, if I was doing my own Premier League rankings, I might put them a little bit higher. I would say the only thing that stops me from putting a West Ham in 8th or 7th is the fact that you've got so much competition for those places already, because you do have United, Spurs, Aston Villa, Newcastle, etc. You've got to put somewhere. So if you're putting a West Ham in there, that means one of those teams I just listed have to go in 9th or 10th. And that's going to feel really bad. So that's the only reason I would consider not putting them in 8th or 7th.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think what we're seeing at the moment is we're kind of seeing a bit of a bunching up of teams. You know, when you get to that 16 to 20, you're probably you know who's kind of there. But then once you get to that 13 through to 8, it could be any of them really. They could. It's so easy to interchange between all of them. The surprise take is from another one of my mates, the club, good old Rory Jennings and his boys. But they've got Newcastle up in 10th. This one I have a bit more respect for, because we haven't done fantastically in the transfer market. I think if we get Mark Gahey, that'll be huge. But yeah, we'll speak more about Newcastle when we get there. But what do you think about them in 10th?
I still disagree with it. I wouldn't have put it's too low. I wouldn't have put Newcastle in 10th. There was a lot of debate because on the club they had 3 people discussing it, so it was pretty split down the middle. Actually, I think one half of the room was lower than 10th and one was higher, and they kind of went for an average.
All right, fair. Then in 9th we got Crystal Palace. So I think that's kind of fair. We spoke about Palace previously. It depends big time on if they keep Gahey and if they keep Eze. I think if they can, then they will. I think they'll challenge top 10 100%.
I think 9th might be a bit high for them. We spoke a little bit earlier about momentum going into the season, and I feel like the momentum for Palace is actually kind of negative at the moment because they're losing players. They're not seeing anyone come in who's squad changing, I'll call it. So I would say they've got negative momentum. If they were to start the season, lose their first 2 games, I think the fan base would very quickly turn. I know you were saying all fan bases can do that, but particularly with that negative environment, it could turn sour, I think, quicker. The patience would be even less around that team. So
yeah, fair. Then we've got probably one of the biggest surprise takes in a positive way, with the Irish guy giving us Bournemouth finishing in 9th. And again, we've spoken a fair bit about Bournemouth now, so I won't go too deep into it, but I think 9th is a big call, and I just can't see that happening, really.
Yeah, now that Solanke is going to leave, I can't. To be fair to the Irish guy, he made that call prior to the Solanke sale. So he was going in with the premise that Solanke would continue to score his goals if they just shore up the defence a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Then we get to 8th position, and we have the average position is Newcastle. And I think this one I can understand. I mean, this is where my mate Alex Griffin and I agree on our teams being better than they probably are in reality. But I think 8th for me, I'd still see us pushing that top 4. I see it without Europe. We've got no European competitions this year, so we'll play less games. We've got Tonali back for the full season. We've reset all of our injuries. Other than I think Sven Botman is a big miss, but he will come back throughout the season. Potentially getting Mark Gahey in, and if we get one more winger, then that top 4 spot is definitely within reach. But obviously, that's all a lot of ifs. If none of that happens, then I still think we're good enough to push top 6. I still think we're good enough to finish 5th or 6th.
Yeah, for a second, I thought you were saying, I'm agreeing with my mate, Alex, will finish 8th. That's a good position for Newcastle, the way you started that, which is really funny. But I agree with you. I wouldn't have put Newcastle as low as 8th. They will likely have a less injury hit season compared to last year. So that's a factor. I don't want to talk too much into this. We'll get there when we get there. But that's been a huge motivating factor why a lot of people have put United higher this season, is they'll have less injuries. So if you're going to use that logic, you've got to apply it to everyone, aka Newcastle in the situation. Tonali being available again is basically like a new signing. We all love that saying. But in Tonali's case, I believe it's
actually true.
It's actually true. So, and if they get Mark Gahey, that's huge. I would also say that I mentioned earlier about stability. The fact that Newcastle haven't lost anyone major, they have a more stable squad. Everyone knows how Eddie Howe wants to play. Eddie Howe's got a great idea of who his starting 11 is going to be in the big games. And I'll just say lastly, as an Arsenal fan, if I was looking at the top 8 from here, besides maybe a Manchester City away, going away to St. James is the game I look forward to the least, because you just know what you're in for is intense, the big battle, Eddie Howe, those Newcastle fans. And that matters, right? Because when you're trying to get into the top 6, it's all good and well beating Bournemouth at home or something like that, but you've got to actually get points with the other top 6 teams, and Newcastle have that in their squad.
James Alcott's back with the surprise take this time. This time he is actually my mate though, because he's got Man United at 8. And I still don't think Ten Hag knows his best 11. Jadon Sancho is coming back in despite having spent a season as a complete outcast. I don't know how that's going to work out. I don't know who. Kobe Mainoo's done fantastically. You know, I'll put my hand up and say I didn't think he was. He had the potential, but I didn't think he was as good as everyone was saying. I will put my hand up and say I was wrong. He's as good as people are saying right now. He's fantastic.
My big concern with Ten Hag, I actually think he's a very good manager, but from a mentality standpoint, the owners were very clear. They went and they looked around for a new manager, realized there was no one that they deemed better in the market. So they went, okay, cool, you can stay. Like, surely if United lose a couple of games in the season, all the players are looking around the dressing room going, how much longer is this guy actually going to be here for? Because the owners already tried to get rid of him. They just couldn't find anyone better. So I feel like the owners have actually put Ten Hag in a really precarious position going into the season, to the dressing room dynamic.
Yeah, I definitely tend to agree with you. I still think that backroom is not in a very secure place. I know we've spoken about it, but I think momentum off the field has been to and fro. Then 7th, we've got Chelsea. Chelsea is the average in 7th, and I think that's a bit high for Chelsea. I'd probably put Newcastle ahead of Chelsea, and I might put, like West Ham ahead of Chelsea. I think there's too many signings. We've spoken about them a little bit already, but too many signings, new manager in, and they haven't dealt with the problem they had to deal with Pochettino last year, which was too big a squad. You cannot give 44 players a game. It's not possible. And you're just going to end up with really unhappy players in the background.
Yeah, they need to sell a lot of players, and Maresca doesn't really impress me. He had by far the best squad in the championship last year, and he won it, I get that. But it wasn't similar to the year when Newcastle got 100 and whatever points, and they won the championship, and they had the best squad in the league. So I wasn't blown away by his championship season. We saw what happened to Vincent Kompany when he blew away the championship and then got blown up in the Premier League the very next year. So I'm not convinced by the manager. Too many signings.
I mean, we'll see where that goes. The surprise take on that one is, funny enough, West Ham from the Irish guy. We've spoken a bit about West Ham already. I think we both agree that they probably have the ability to go there. So I think I'm pretty happy to move on with that one.
Yeah, the surprises, for the most part, get less and less surprising the closer you get to the top of the table.
Yeah, 100%. Then we've got 6th. We have Tottenham Hotspur. They won't finish outside the top 6. I'm never going to be that kind of person to say that else. And they definitely have the potential to be a top 4 side again, but I just don't know if they're going to do it, to be honest.
I liked sixth, but with the Solanke signing, that was one of their clear flaws. So they were playing Son and striker. What other choice they have? And now they got Solanke, which is actually quite a big addition to the squad, in my opinion, because they got Son. If they can get something out of Richarlison and Brendan Johnson, actually, do you know what? They have quite a few options suddenly for both wing and striker. So that's an if. It's a big if. My point is, I think maybe a fifth place instead of sixth would maybe be more reflective when you consider who else is in and around that area.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think Solanke. I'm not sold on Solanke. I think that's my big thing. I'm not sold on him as a main striker. It feels a bit like putting Son in striker again. You know, he can do the job, but is he a top 6 striker? I don't know, realistically. The surprise take for this one was from the club, and it was Liverpool in 6. And I don't think that's too harsh, honestly. I think Arne Slot coming in, he's done well in the preseason. I've got nothing bad to say about Arne Slot. I don't think he's going to fail miserably.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by this at all. I'm not going to talk into it too much because we'll speak about Liverpool when we actually get to their average position. But I'm not too surprised to see Liverpool or uppers. I'm surprised that the surprise call for Liverpool was 6. That's what I'm surprised about rather than the call itself.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
So moving on to 5th place, we have Aston Villa in 5th place, which is an interesting one to me just because Villa had such a good season last year. But when you look at some of the competition for that 4th place, you're talking about United and Newcastle, who were very injury hit. So if those two clubs, for example, had a less injury hit season, would they have actually not made 4th, Aston Villa? You know, so to me, that's a concern. I really like Emery. I do want to mention on Emery, as an Arsenal fan, I would know, but it's clear at his previous clubs like Seville, PSG, and Arsenal, it normally goes really well for him in his first year, and it's the second and third year that tends to fall apart a little bit for Emery. In his first year, he pretty much has always done well at all the clubs, full first season, I should say. And then in his second full season, I think it's a bit to do with tactical fatigue because he's such a tactically intense manager. Sometimes the players get a little bit over it, maybe, or they try and deviate from the plan a little bit. So that's my concern for Emery, is if he's going to be able to keep it together.
I think Emery, firstly, is like a lot of these managers who kind of hop around the top level teams, you know, the top 6 to 8 teams in these different leagues. Once you start hopping around, it's generally because you're a good enough manager to be there for a short period of time, but you're not extending it. And that's either because your results are going backwards, or you're not driving a club forwards. And I think that is one thing I will say. And I do agree with you. I think I probably have them similar to what I thought Newcastle would be last year. I probably have them 7th, 8th.
Yeah. And then the surprise call for 5th was from your friend James, and he predicted that Brighton would become 5th this season. That just seems like a very out there call. I disagree because I think that Brighton are on their way down as a club rather than on their way up. So that's my take.
Yeah, we've spoken a fair bit about Brighton. I think they've been there a couple of times. So it's very interesting to see the teams who have been there a couple of times, really, in both up and down. And Brighton are one of them. So they're clearly a team that people can't put their finger on, really.
Yeah. United, they're the pick for 4th place. So they're going to sneak into Champions League this year. I don't personally see it. I just think, like I said, the ownership have undermined Ten Hag a little bit. I do like the fact that they've done some early transfer business. They've also lost a couple of players, like Varane has left on a free transfer, etc. So with less injuries and the transfers, I think they'll do better than 8th this year, but that's like 6th. You know what I mean? 2 places better, 6th position. I don't see them coming 4th.
I'll probably put them in 5th again, same as last year. I think they might just miss out on top 4. I think their problem all comes in the fact they just can't beat. Like you're saying for Newcastle, teams go to St. James's Park and they're scared of going to St. James's Park. No one's really scared to go to Old Trafford anymore.
Anyway, the surprise take for 4th was Newcastle from the Irish guy. So he's felt that Newcastle will make it into the Champions League this year. A lot of the thinking around that was about the injuries that they had in Tonali losing out last season. So I think we spoke about Newcastle at great length already, but I think that's a very reasonable shout, Newcastle 4th.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable shout. I don't personally see it, but it could happen.
Looking into third place, I mean, I think the top three is very obvious at this point, but Liverpool in third I disagree with that bluntly. I just think it's not that I'm like, oh, Liverpool's terrible this year, whatever. You've got on the slot coming in. Whenever we've seen a long-term manager leaving a club, whether it's Arsene Wenger, Alex Ferguson, you name it, the club generally pretty much always has a bit of a drop-off. Doesn't have to be dramatic, but a bit of a drop-off. So if they came third last year, they haven't bought really anyone major. They haven't sold anyone major either, but they've just lost their manager, same squad. So to me, if they came third last year, same squad, but new manager, then that's at least fourth or fifth rather than third. And I'm tempted to go fifth or sixth. I think they will miss out on Champions League, Liverpool.
I might put them fifth and then drop a couple of teams down.
Yeah.
But I do think I'd struggle to see them. But at the same time, I feel like I've said this about the last 5 teams. They'll struggle to get into that top 3. And in the same way I said, 8th to 14th, you can't really call. I think 8th to 3rd is very difficult, and it could be any single one of those teams. Any one of those teams could be in any of those positions.
Yeah, and then the surprise take for third was Benjamin Bloom feels that Aston Villa will finish in third, which is a much higher finish than I think the others. I mean, the average was fifth, but that difference between third and fifth is a big deal.
Yeah, I do agree. I think we've spoken about Villa already. And you know what? I'm gonna change my answer. I'm gonna put Villa in third. Villa's gonna be
okay. One thing I'm just gonna mention, when you'd play Football Manager and you'd do 5 or 10 seasons in the future, and maybe you go manage somewhere else, and you just look at the Premier League table in 5-10 years, and the table reads, Manchester City, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Newcastle, you'd go, yeah, of course, it's bloody Football Manager. That would never happen. You're playing Football Manager 2014 or something. But in reality, that could be the top 4 at the end of the season, and you'd be like, that's perfectly reasonable. So in that way, Football Manager might be more accurate than we think about how the Premier League evolves and certain teams come up and come down, not just in the league, I mean actually placement in the league. Anyway, going into the top 2, we know who it is. It's Arsenal and City. The big question is, who's number 1, who's number 2? I'm going to just give both of them because there's no point pretending like, who's number 1 after we reveal number 2. So the average, literally by 0.1 of a place, was Manchester City in second, with Arsenal in first. And Vizzy had City in second. One of the guys had City in second. And actually can't see it here, but Matt SB had Arsenal in first place. So don't know what your take is there. I personally, as an Arsenal fan, would just go City again, because City are that team. They've still got Pep. There's nothing too dramatic. You can say the Chargers, but they had the Chargers last year.
It is a thing of, by Christmas, you're sitting there going like, Man City might not win it. And people laugh about it. It's Arsenal who've been top at Christmas a couple of times and they lose it. But it's like, you look around, you're like, to be honest, Liverpool also had major chances to win and got chased down. Arsenal had their chances to win, got chased down. And it's just the way Pep Guardiola is. I think what he's trying to do almost, I think he's trying to out-Pep in a way. Because it feels like he's trying to create the next system in the first half of the season. The first half of the season is all about trying to create what's gonna work for the next 10 years. And then in the last half of the season, he goes, well, I've tried it. It's not worked. We're going back to the old tactics. I'm just going to win anyway, which is really, really annoying because can you just not? So, yeah, I think it's a big surprise to have Arsenal averaging on the top, to be honest.
Yeah, it was close, obviously.
It's very close, but even being close, I'm still surprised that there's more people who put out Arsenal top technically.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, that's been our Premier League Football Unspoken predictions for the year. Hope you enjoyed that. If you disagreed with any of the calls, go to that guy's channel and swear at him, not us, about it. On a serious note, guys, appreciate you taking a listen. And until next time, this has been Football Unspoken. Cheers.
Cheers.